I am really excited today to be making sourdough discard blueberry muffins. I have tried tons of recipes and this is by far my family's favorite and my favorite. It's moist and actually has a decent amount of protein in it. And I even add a little nettle that you can't even tell is there, dried nettle. But this, I feel like, should be the beginning, sort of the easy intro to using sourdough. Sourdough discard is the easiest thing to use because you basically just add it to any recipe and it just adds a lovely little tang and flavor. And half the time I don't even feel like you really can tell. It can just add moistness and a little more fluff. So I want to do a whole sourdough series that includes recipes for active sourdough starter and for sourdough discard, and just dive in and do all different things. I have some really fun ideas of some like bake-offs where you use sourdough discard for the same recipe or active sourdough. Anyway, I'm very excited. Today we're starting so simple because I feel like muffins are just one of the easier, simpler things to bake in general. And then sourdough discard, just like low consequence because you're not depending on it for leavening your baked good. Easy peasy. I'm starting with 1 egg, and then I have this sourdough starter that is in desperate need of being fed. And when you feed your starter, you need to pour off the sourdough discard. So you're just starting with a little bit of the Kilcher so that it can get all bubbly and eat up all the new flour. You don't want too much sourdough starter in here when you feed it because it'll just eat up all the flour you give it so quickly and not actually create like active sourdough starter that's bubbling and rising. So this recipe calls for 1/2 cup of sourdough starter, but you know, if you use a little extra, it's like not going to affect your recipe that much. So I'd say this is more like 3/4 cup of starter just because I can have, or 3/4 cup of sourdough discard because I can have a lot. So you could use sugar for this recipe. It calls for 1 cup of sugar. I very rarely do what most recipes call for in the sugar or honey department because I just feel like sugar is a little overdone. And there's a point where I'm like, you're not making it, it's just not making it actually that much sweeter. It's like, I don't know, in my opinion, there is just a point where it's sweet is just too sweet. Can't make it sweeter, just tastes too sweet. You know what I mean? Maybe not. Also, because it's honey instead of sugar, it's a little bit more intense, and so you want to do a little bit less honey if you're using honey too. So I'm doing about 3/4 cup, not quite, because it really doesn't need to be that sweet. I mean, these will be plenty sweet. My kids did not complain last time. So we have our honey, our egg, and then yogurt. So this is about 3/4 cup of yogurt. You could use sour cream. You could use buttermilk. You might need to add just a tiny bit more flour if you were gonna do buttermilk because buttermilk is a little more liquidy than yogurt or sour cream. Oh, and then we have butter. So this is 1/2 cup of butter. So the yogurt, the egg, and the butter just add a decent amount of protein. Some people who are just sort of gluten intolerant, not like very allergic to gluten, can deal with sourdough, and especially sourdough that is well fermented because it's eaten up and kind of processed a lot of that gluten for your body. So if you wanted to use gluten-free flour, I love Bob's Red Mill 1-to-1. It's my favorite gluten-free flour. You could easily use gluten-free flour and then you'd have a, like, not gluten-free because you're using sourdough, but it's sourdough discard. It's like really well digested gluten. So anyway, that is another possibility. I'm just going to use white flour today because it's what I got on hand. But I just kind of wanted to offer that as a possible alternative. I have 2 teaspoons of vanilla here. I often just double whatever a recipe says with vanilla because I love vanilla. I love flavor. I love strong flavor. All right. So now I'm gonna set these wet ingredients aside, and I have my dry ingredients here. So this is a 1.5 cups of flour. I have some dried nettles. So we collect lots of nettles over the spring, because the spring is when you harvest nettles before they get too tall and actually develop some things in them that are not good for you. So you really only want to eat nettles in the spring when they're small. And so I sneak these in a lot of stuff, baked goods and soups and stuff. And I just powder it really good. You can't even tell. I promise you won't taste it. And this stuff is so nutrient dense, just highly healthful in so many ways, especially in the winter when we're really lacking fresh dark leafy greens up here, and the stores, yes, they have them, but half the time they're half rotten. So this is just a great way to get a little bit more dark leafy greens in the kiddos. Sparrow loves nettles. She'll eat nettles any way you have them. She'll just eat these dried nettles plain. Weird, I know. However, Finley is like my junk food kid, and it's hard to get super healthy things in him. He doesn't like them. This is really helpful, full of iron and vitamins and minerals. All right. See, you can hardly even tell that they're in there. And last time I made this, I added a few oats. So because I used honey, which is a little more liquidy, and I used a tiny bit of extra sourdough starter, this is kind of allowing to offset sort of the dried nettles, and then a few oats. I don't put a ton of oats, just a few. You need 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, 2 teaspoons baking powder. You could sift these in if they're a little chunky. Mine are actually pretty good. I am always into the shortcuts and keeping things simple, so I don't do a lot of sifting unless if it is necessary for a maybe more particular recipe, or I have some chunky baking soda. Okay, that's it. So now, all right, so we'll just fold in the dry ingredients. One cup of blueberries. So I would say you could exchange, I use white currants, which I doubt you will have, but because that's something I have quite a bit of sometimes. These would be really good with red currants. Yeah, so I feel like the berries are fairly exchangeable. These are some wild Alaskan blueberries that we picked in Prince William Sound this summer. Burst of sunshine in summer and a muffin. Okay, look at how pretty those are. Pretty purple muffins. I preheated my oven to 425. We will cook these at that temperature for like 8 minutes about, and then lower it to 350 for another about 12 minutes. But in all honesty, I feel like every oven is so different. So you really just want to pay attention. And I'll show you some clues that you can look at to indicate when they're done, because overcooked muffins are dry muffins, and dry muffins are not yummy. You know, they're fine fresh, but once they are a day old, dry muffins, you really can tell. Anyway, I love this thing. Oh, and look at these cutie. These are silicone muffin liners. I love them because the muffins just like fall out of them. The kids love it because I don't know about you guys, but I feel like most paper muffin liners stick to muffins so bad, especially if you're eating like a fresh muffin. Then it's like, yeah, no, half the muffin ends up on the paper and then you're like chewing on the paper to not waste it. You're weird, maybe like me. It's like, I always feel like there's more information, like silicone's fine, silicone's bad at high temperatures, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, I don't know, but I kind of love these. Busy homesteading mom. Let's keep it simple, make it easy. But look at these pretties. And now we're gonna stick them in the oven. Muffins going in. 425, timer. 8 minutes, and then we wait, and then I'll lower temp and do it for another 12-ish, maybe, minutes. All right, so I just wanted to talk a little bit about sourdough starter, because that's where it all begins, is just learning about sourdough starter. When feeding my starter, I have about a 1/4 cup of the starter, and then I put about a cup of flour and a cup of water. Because I don't always measure and I can get a little quick and haphazard with it, sometimes my starter will end up being like a little too liquidy. So then when I pour it off, I would need to add like a little extra flour that next round. It's kind of just actually about learning the consistency it should be. I feel like that's the easiest thing to do. Yes, measuring and weighing and doing it really precisely. There's lots of directions out there of like precise measurements, and starting there can be great. But I feel like in the end, just to make things simpler and easier and not getting out of scale every time you're trying to feed your starter is a good plan. You can see here, this is sort of the consistency I want it. If it's too thick, it's harder for it to rise and the bubbles to push up. And then if it's too liquidy, it's similar. It just sort of stays flat and doesn't get that rising effect. Sometimes I put a rubber band around this, and that's actually probably a better way to do it, but I also use a Sharpie. And so I've just fed this. You want your sourdough starter to be able to like bubble and breathe a bit. So a lot of people just put like that reusable beeswax over it, or yeah, some sort of cloth or another over the starter. You don't want it uncovered because it dries out. I found that this flip top, it breathes enough. It doesn't, the pressure doesn't stay in here. And so I'm able to just use this. Anyway, you can see there's some of my old marks on there, which I kind of just wipe off. But ideally, you mark your starter when you feed it so that you can tell when it's at peak activity, basically, when it's doubled in size. But you kind of have to know where it starts. That's what I do. But what I was saying about a rubber band is you can put a rubber band around here, and then you don't have to like wipe your mark off every time, and you move your rubber band according to where it is when you finish feeding it. So yeah, once it's doubled, then you have active sourdough starter, and that is what you would use for a recipe calling for active starter bread recipes. And there's actually 2 different cinnamon roll recipes. One uses discard and yeast, and one uses just sourdough starter. I'm really excited to do a little bake-off there, so that's coming. And see which one's better, like taste-wise. You know, moisture-wise, I really want to critique it with my family. And also, it's just fun if you don't have active sourdough starter to still be able to make kind of sourdough-flavored cinnamon rolls, because I personally prefer that. That is the very beginning of learning about sourdough. There are many recipes that call for making a leaven like the night before you start your sourdough loaf, and that is good because you are being really precise and getting the perfect moisture content of starter so that everything is like perfect and ready for your bread. It's kind of just making sure that your leaven, what you're going to use for your bread to rise, is perfect. It's at peak activity and perfect moisture content and all of that. Some recipes call for that. Some just call for active sourdough starter and are a little less precise. I would like to experiment more. If I can't say that one works better than the other at this point in my sourdough journey. It would be fun to experiment with it and see if, once again, kind of have a bake-off of sourdough bread loaf that you do with a leaven, and then one with just what I see as active sourdough starter. But, oh my gosh, could talk about sourdough all day long. It's like one of those things, once you get into it, it's like so cool and interesting and fun and exciting, and you fail, and maybe you fail again. But then when you succeed and make like a beautiful sourdough loaf, for me, there's nothing more satisfying. It's like you worked hard for that. I love this book. I got this book actually later in my sourdough journey just to troubleshoot. My sourdough starter was just not lively, and I couldn't figure out why exactly. It just didn't seem happy, and this book really helped with troubleshooting lots of things, and troubleshooting like why your loaf of bread maybe isn't rising how you would like. I don't know, it just was so helpful, even for someone who's made sourdough bread for a while. I am by no means a master, but this really talks a lot about the super minute details and some of the science behind it, and I think that helps. You just have a deeper understanding of how everything is functioning together. And then it has recipes in it too. Let's check our muffins. I think they might be ready. One way I really like to test muffins is by the like spring test. Yeah, you can be quiet. So the spring test is where you touch it and it springs back mostly. Like it just has a spring to it. That means it's done. If you poke it and it stays dented, it means it's still really wet in there, right? There's no spring back. So these are done. I want to show you how fun these are that they fall out of their little... So you really should wait a few minutes for them to cool before you mess with them, because they'll probably fall apart, but I'm gonna do it anyway, because I'm a rebel. They don't stick at all. It's amazing. Like, to the tin. And then, look at this. Pop. Yeah, just, you flip it over, it like is not attached in any capacity. Amazing. And you can just run those through the dishwasher. Easy peasy. Anyway, look at that beautiful, steaming, hot blueberry muffin. Okay. Oh. Oh my gosh, so yummy. It's probably like way too hot for me to eat. They are all the things. They are moist. They are fluffy. They are sweet. They are tangy. They fill all my baked good cup in all the ways. The more you eat sourdough, the more that you want all baked goods to taste sourdough. It's like an addiction, almost. I feel like there's just some things like that in life. So another fun thing you could do with these, you know, I'm always trying to keep the sugar like a little less, because there's just sugar everywhere. And at school, and I cannot control a lot of their sugar intake. So at home, you know, try to minimize it. But another really yummy thing to do with blueberry muffins is make a little crumble top for them. The kids love that. So I highly recommend adding that to this as just a little extra texture and yumminess. Well, thank you for joining along with me today on my very first sourdough. Thank you for joining me today for my very first sourdough video. There's more to come. I'm really excited. So if you want to keep up and know what's happening, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and like this video. It helps make it so I can make time and Ivan can make time to do more of these videos. We really love it. We really want to keep giving you the content. So spread the word, subscribe, like, and yeah, more to come.